Ever since Apple introduced the Xserve way back in 2002, I've wanted to rack mount my Mac. Yes, I'm a Mac user, and yes, I compile the Linux kernel daily. Get over it. But why rack mount? Well, for starters, it looks cool, and I love cosplaying as a sysadmin. Other than that, it keeps my desk nice and clean and keeps my main editing computer secure so cables don't wiggle out over time. For years, I only used laptops, so the little rack I have under my desk only held my audio equipment, and I used to set my laptop up on top where the Macs are right now. But a couple years ago, after I bought that M1 Mini, I racked it up in this 1U rack mount kit from My Electronics. Well, this year I upgraded to a Mac Studio, but I'm still keeping the Mac Mini to run Asahi Linux. But I had a problem. The Mac Studio is really tall, at least compared to the Mini. You can ignore the huge gaming PC under my desk. I don't think I'll be fitting that thing in the rack anytime soon. But even though it's taller, the Studio is still smaller and cheaper than my only other Mac option, the Mac Pro Rack. That thing takes a full 5U of rack space and starts at $6,500. But since the Mac Studio is still pretty tall, I couldn't mount it next to my Mini in the old 1U rack mount. So for now, my Mac Studio is sitting on top of my little desk rack, and I put the Mini next to it so it wouldn't be so lonely. This setup works, but since I have a rack, I kinda want everything inside. It'd also be nice since I wouldn't have to see the rat's nest of cables plugged into the back. Plus, every time I plug in an SD card on the front slot, the Mac Studio kinda slides backwards, which gets annoying. First world problem, I know. But while we're talking first world problems, I have to say, only Apple would make someone think having an SD card on the computer or having front I/O is a groundbreaking new feature. But hey, it is way more convenient than the dongle I used to lose all the time. But anyways, a month ago, My Electronics reached out and told me they would send a new solution, this new Mac Studio rack mount that can hold not one, but two Mac Studios, or you can convert one side to hold a Mac Mini. And that's perfect for my use case. I'm not Mac Stadium or Uptime Labs. I don't have to try to cram like 50 of these things on a rack shelf, so two Macs in one rack is just right. So today, I'm getting my Mac back in the rack. That sounded funnier when I wrote it earlier. The rack My Electronics sent is part of their modular system for rack mounting Macs, Raspberry Pis, and Apple TVs. Using some replacement covers, you can mount two Raspberry Pis, an Apple TV, or a Mac Mini next to the Mac Studio if you want. There are also two keystone cutouts on the front, so you can put through any I/O to the front of the rack, like Ethernet, if you want to connect your Mac to a network switch on the front side. There's also this little mechanical arm that lets you press the power button from the front of the rack. Without it, you couldn't do things like force shut down the Mac or put it into recovery mode, or, turn it on at all. It looks like they sent a few accessories, like an I/O faceplate that I could use instead of my Mac Mini if I ever get rid of it, so I could pass through more ports on the front side. They have little I/O kits for HDMI, USB 3, or Cat 6a, and I think there are some other ones on their website. The great thing is, it's just Keystone, so if you can find a Keystone connector for it, you can put through whatever you want on the front. The first step in installing it was moving my existing gear down a bit to make some room for the new rack mount. It's 3U instead of the old one that was 1U, so I had to move my audio equipment down and ditch the 2U shelf I had in there that just had my audio interface on it. I dry fit the Studio rack mount and it fit like a glove, so I pulled it out and worked on putting in the two Keystone jacks I wanted to connect to the Mini, a network jack, and HDMI. That way I can plug the Mini into my switch and plug in my second monitor when I need it. Otherwise, I just run the Mini headless. One complaint I have about those Keystone jacks is the mounting mechanism. There's just a single screw holding a metal plate to secure the jack, so it's a little wobbly. It'd be nice if there were two screws for a bit more stability, or one plate across both holes. The way they have it works, but it was a little cumbersome and the ports don't feel rock solid like everything else on the rack. I screwed the rack mount back in, then took off the front faceplate. That plate actually holds the Macs in place and it has the Keystone jacks on it. So you have to plug those in while installing the faceplate, making it a little bit more complicated. It'd be nice if the Keystones were part of the main rack unit and the facade just went around them, but that would probably complicate the design a bit. The Mini and Studio just sit in the respective cutouts, and that recesses the fan intake area a tiny bit. I haven't had any thermal issues because of it, so at least there's enough airflow for my M1 Macs. The front of the rack is cut out a little taller on the bottom so the Macs can pull in fresh air, but at least on the Studio, I might be worried if I had an M1 Ultra. It can pull through a lot of air under load. But hey, it's not like Apple did anyone a favor with the way they ventilate these things. The ring that goes all the way around the base of the Mac pulls in air and it gets blown out the back. It's not like most PCs or servers where air always enters in the front and it exhausts out the back. And it's also not like most PCs or servers because cleaning dust out, at least on the Studio, requires some sticky and destructive disassembly. I'm not sure what Apple was thinking making those screws inaccessible. I popped in a cable pass-through under my PDU, then I put my audio interface back on a 1U shelf so it wasn't just resting on the voice processor. Then I went around behind and plugged everything in. There aren't any cable tie-downs or built-in cable management on the rack mount, so you need to make sure your cables are routed so they won't pull out. There is this little weird plate with 4 holes above where the Mac Mini goes, but it looks like it's just there to provide some support to hold down the smaller Mini. Both Macs fit like a glove and the little power button arms were right on target, so the next step was to wire up the front side and turn them on. I plugged the Mini's front Ethernet pass-through into my cheap 10 gig MikroTik switch, which I have on its own 3D printed rack mount. There's a link in the description to the switch and the rack mount if you want to replicate my setup. Finally, I turned on both of the Macs. I plugged my second monitor into the front HDMI port, and look at that, 2 Macs running in my rack. So after mounting that all up, what do I think? Well, I'm happy everything's back in my rack. Again, first world problem, but as someone who plugs in an SD card 5 or 10 times a day, every day, having that be a one-handed operation again is really nice. And keeping the Macs inside my rack instead of on top means they should get at least a little less dust in them. But I still dread the day I'm gonna have to open up the Studio and blow it out. Build quality is excellent, the finish on everything is durable, and the powder coating seems to be done really well. The spacing for both Macs is precise to the millimeter, and the power buttons both hit solid every time. My 2 main gripes are probably the lack of any cable management and those front keystone jacks. Having a little tray extend behind the Macs with slots for zip ties would make permanent mounting more reliable. And the front I/O keystones are both slightly flimsy because of the way they're mounted. Even if they just had one metal backplate with both of the same screws instead of 2 little backplates with 1 screw each, it'd be a lot more solid. The only other thing I can think of that would make this unit better, and it's a really small thing, is using captive thumb screws for the front plate. Not a big deal at all, but I just thought that would add a little polish. So that's all well and good. Racking up my Macs is convenient, and for me it might actually make sense since I already have a rack and I use it in a professional environment. But should you consider it? Well, maybe, but for most people probably not. These rack units cost a little over $250 plus $25 shipping. That means you're getting close to $300 just to mount your Mac. I mean, it ain't like paying $700 for a few wheels or $1,000 for a monitor stand, but still, $300 isn't nothing. And if you just have Mac Minis, they sell a 1U rack mount kit for a lot less. But if you have a Mac Studio and you want it in a rack, there aren't many other options. And since this isn't a high volume item, it's probably not going to get much cheaper. So if you really need to rack up a Mac Studio or 2, this is the best option I've seen so far. But if you don't, and you don't mind your Mac Studio sliding around a bit when you plug in an SD card, then you can skip it. And you could always just put the Studio on a rack shelf, but then access to the power button is limited and you still get that sliding issue. Until next time, I'm Jeff Geerling.